Welcome to the Lift Your Story podcast with guest David Giffen.
Hi, everyone. I am Lori Ann. I am that gal from Milton, Ontario, Canada, and I'm with.
I am that guy. I am Roy Miller from Dallas, Texas, and we would like to welcome you to our Lift Your Story podcast.
So this episode, we have David Giffen, and he is an author, an international speaker, and a coach. Thank you so much for being with us, David.
Yeah. It's really nice to be here. Thank you.
We're glad to have you. So, David, your book, Redemptive Trauma, Confessions of a Defrocked Priest. That's a pretty interesting title. Can you elaborate on that for us?
I can. A number of years ago, February 2017, I fractured my ankle in 3 places. It's no great story. I wish I could say I was rescuing widows and orphans, but I wasn't. I was walking to work and I slipped on black ice and I went down. I heard a pop, and it's a moment that changed my life. I had been sober from alcohol at that point for 9.5 years. I was functioning as a very successful priest in the Anglican Church. I had planted new forms of ministry and new congregations. I was working very hard to bridge a divide around those who identified as LGBTQ and those who were conservative Christians, and trying to find a common meeting place that allowed us to be a community together. So I felt, my life was in a pretty good spot, right? Like I was married. I have my wonderful son who was, 4 at the time. And everything really changed for me because I got addicted to oxycodone and other drugs that you find yourself taking when they stop prescribing the oxycodone. And my life went completely upside down. I lost my job because I entered into a relationship that I shouldn't have with someone who worked for me. And my marriage fell apart. And I found myself trying to put together, trying to figure out, what was I going to do next? Where was I going to go? And I just started in therapy and in treatment. I started to write. I started to write letters. I started to write journals. I started to write. I was interviewed recently, and I found myself. I just said I wrote my way out. I put my life that hadn't made any sense to me in so many different ways. My life as a priest and my life before that, and my life as an immigrant from Scotland with my very young family. I put it all together, and when I shared it with my loved ones, they said, other people need to read this too. And so Redemptive Trauma, Confession of a Defrocked Priest was the title that we thought might get some attention.
Wow.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, really. I mean, that's kind of a complete upside down to your life at a moment. How hard was it for you to get back on your feet and kind of go in a new direction?
What I can tell you is when people say it's by the grace of God, it's because they know how close to the edge they got, right? Like because if you haven't gotten that close to falling over the edge, you might not really realize how big a deal that is that you gain back from it, right? Like, or if you haven't walked with someone to get there, because there are lots of ways to get a glimpse of that. But that's how, one or two more bad decisions, and it might have been my life, right? Like in lots of ways. And let's be clear, my life's not perfect today. I don't have it all figured out. And you can ask people around me. I don't have it all figured out all the time. But it's I'm not quite as, I'm not living on that close to the edge. And how, when you've been that far down, you realize that there's no way you ever get out of that unless you got a hand pulling you out of it, right? Like you don't come back from there on your own. It's one of the most important things around mental health, that whether it's addiction or personality disorder or trauma or whatever it might be, nobody gets out of it alone. Good therapists, good community around you, reaching out to family who can be of support. I was in a place that I didn't imagine my life could look like it is now again. And a lot of people helped me get here.
Yeah.
That actually was going to be my next question, because I know how you feel. I've been down there. I lived in a barn for a couple of years with no running water and anything, but I did have support system. But you also had the losses as well. The people who just sort of looked at you and went, "Are you kidding me? We saw you up here. You went and did this, and then you end up down here." You really get to know your true friends and supporters at this point. How is that for you in regards to that?
Well, let me say first, before I answer that, I'm very fortunate to live in a part of the world and have the color of skin that I have, and to have the opportunities that I had, because I didn't find myself living in a barn with no running water, right? And I know people who have had it far worse than me. And I always want to point that out, that that depending on where you are and where you come from, and at what point you took an off ramp, right? Like to get to take that helping hand. Sometimes, I had many more opportunities than many other people. So I'm humbled whenever I stand next to someone who's been in that place as well. Can you ask that question once more for me?
So I was just saying, I mean, and just to make it clear, I did have support and people telling me to get out of the barn. I just had my independence, so that was where I could afford to stay.
I hear you.
Without leaning on other people, and that's something that's wrong too. When you get to those points, it's like you said, when someone's reaching out, grab their hand.
Yeah, totally.
Try to do it on your own.
Yeah,
and,
you're probably not gonna.
Yeah. Well, it takes time to do that, and all of a sudden when you finally realize it's it's okay to, you don't have to be that independent. You can actually say, I'll take your help, and then get yourself out of it. But I also was talking about the ones that kind of like, yes, you have the support system, but you have the ones that kind of shun you and say, okay, well, wow, really?
I think you learn, this is what I always, when I was a preacher, this is what I used to talk about, the difference between codependence, independence, and interdependence. And you don't want to be codependent, right? You don't want to be living in these relationships where your entire existence is dependent on that other person, and theirs is upon you. You don't want to be entirely independent where no one else matters to you. But there has to be that interdependence where your life does affect other people's lives, and their lives affects yours, and you work with one another. And I think for those who found themselves isolated for whatever reason, whether it's in the pandemic like this or in whatever situation leads to isolation, none of us is meant to live alone, right? We're not really, right? We're meant to have on some scale, on some level, connections with other people. And I think those connections are often the primary antidote before anything else for mental health and addiction. Because, when I went from being a pastor to a community of over 1,000 to, looking at my phone and not seeing anyone having called me for months, right? Often when you've got trauma injuries to the brain, which is really what post-traumatic stress disorder is, they're trauma injuries to your brain, and when those injuries get poked or prodded, you're unlikely to not respond, right? Because unless you've done a lot of work. And, you know, my hat is off to the people who have gone before me and doing years and years of work, whether it's in 12-step programs or trauma recovery programs or whatever it is that that people have committed to forming their life around. You know, I have a lot of respect for it. But my friends at the bottom, I wish everybody, you know, at my worst moments, my three best friends, my guys I knew since I was a little boy. I joke, it's the guys I knew when I still wet the bed, who are still, they're uncles to my son. You know, there's never been a time where I found myself in a place of too much darkness and one of them didn't show up. They are, you know, I don't know if everybody gets three. I hope everybody gets one of people like this in their life, right? Like, yeah. If I were to, you know, if I were to use my old preacher's voice, I would say that's those are the people where you meet Jesus, right? Where you, you know, in those places where you really didn't think anyone else would show up. And that's who shows up.
It's funny you mentioned that. And I think maybe it may be a guy thing too. Okay. Because you know, they say if you're lucky, if you have 5 true friends, you know, in your life. But I had, like you, I had 3 that I grew up with that from like 3rd grade, you know, unfortunately 2 of them have passed away. But like you say, man, those guys, you know, they're always there no matter what, good, bad. Call them at 3 o'clock in the morning. They're always there for you, you know. And
I know those guys.
yeah. And I mean, I think maybe it's more with the guys than the girls. I really don't know, but I mean,
well, you know,
I can relate to what you're saying.
I talk in my book, in my chapter on love, where I talk about how the English language only has 1 word for love, and other languages have more. And the Greek language, which the New Testament, the Bible is written in, Koine Greek, has 4 words, right? And one of them is philos, which means brotherly love or friendship, right? And it's a love that's not familial. It's not a marital love. And you know, and this is a thing. There's a reason they called it brotherly love. Men need this in their life. And I think often the guys I know that I work with, you know, clients I work with who've struggled with addiction, it's when they lost the philos, the brotherly love in their life, that they started to spiral. Because we need to have those who, it's not our partner, it's not our children who are, you know, dependents. It's other people outside our inner circle, right? Like outside of the family, who you can hear us. You can hear the hard stuff.
Yeah, you say brotherly love, you know, and it's like those guys, you know, they were actually like brothers. They may have been closer than my brother was to me, you know. I mean, and like I said, they're the ones that know all your dark secrets, everything about you, you know. But they're always there for you.
They are.
It's hard to probably put into words. You got to be a guy really to understand it.
Well, we've got the girl thing too. Don't forget.
Tell us about the girl thing. Tell us about the girl thing.
No, I have friends that same with you. I was peeing my pants when I knew them, still in touch. And I have a couple of them, but I moved around a lot. But funny enough, even with moving around a lot, they're still there.
Isn't that amazing?
And I can still call up Denise anytime. And the crazy thing is, when I pick up that phone, it's like we haven't, like, even if it's a year after, but we keep in touch on Facebook, but we haven't talked in a year. I know her voice like that. It's like yesterday. And we do have that as well. I think when you move around a lot, though, you know, you're lucky if you can keep those brotherly loves and sisterly loves. But the other thing too is that they're almost more, I hate to say this, but those friends are almost more trustworthy than your siblings.
But you know, it's like,
you know, it's different. It's different, right? Like these are the people who, you know, your siblings. You don't choose your siblings, right? You don't. You're kind of born into that, right? Like I you know, your family. You know, it's almost like, you know, I used to joke that I was born into the Roman Catholic Church and I became an Anglican. It was like the family I was born into and the spouse I chose. You know, it's I think you love your siblings different than you love your best friends for those brotherly love, sisterly love people. It's different.
Yeah, and like you said, if when you're going through all those issues with addiction and stuff like that, those guys, those true friends, they're there. It doesn't matter, where you were and where you are now. They're there to help you get to wherever you need to be. No questions, no judgment.
Sometimes when you're not even the one walking anymore, sometimes they're carrying you, like there's like literally, right? Like I think it's okay to name that, whether it's all the way to a physical carry or whether they're just emotionally and spiritually carrying you, right? Like, I think, and we talk about men, I think men especially have to be more willing to name their brokenness, be willing to name their vulnerabilities, right? And because it's when we hide those and say we should be ashamed of it, or we shouldn't let people see that. That's garbage, right? Like I don't buy it. I think the more we do that, the more we give other permission to do that, and then maybe we'd have more than three.
Right.
I find it interesting too, and I don't know if this happened to you, but while I was going through my whatever it was I was going through, I found out there was, my girlfriend, she always happy, always sweet, and we talk about certain things, but she never really went into depth until I told her about what I was going through. And then all of a sudden I found out that because of course moving away and not being together every day, she came out as well. So there was like that bonding that she was afraid to tell me that she was going through this stuff to burden me. But then suddenly that opened up. I don't know if your friends opened up a little bit more. Maybe some of them were feeling some of the feelings you were having. But I like that when one person breaks that shell, that the other one's open too.
I found that as a common theme in different parts of my life, whether it was, my early life in the friendship circles I had, or my professional life as a pastor, or even just, the life I have now as a coach, the opportunities I've had to be vulnerable when you share something, whether with a small group or another individual, it gives them permission. It's a key, right? It really is. It's you offering it, and there are times where it feels threatening, right? Because you're putting something out there that if it's not received well, relegate, but my experience is that when you pick trusted people, the kinds of people, and we know who our trusted people are deep down. If you've gone through stuff like you said earlier, the flighty people and the people who stick around. You do. Those people are going to hear your stories. They're going to hold your stories. They're going to keep them sacred, right? Like that's when I think about the reason it mattered so much to me that Rory got to know these men and these friends of mine that I've had since I was a little boy, was partially because I wanted to make sure he knew me, right? Because those guys know me, right? Like they know who I really am, right? Like, and so I want Rory, my son, to know these guys so that he'll really know me as he gets older. I don't want him to just know, because we all try, we do our best as parents, right? I can't show him everything, right? Like I need to have some authority in the room, right? But at some point I want him to know that there are, like, he has those people around who are trusted people who I've trusted for 3 decades, right? So he knows that he can go to those men.
Yeah, because it's like you said, those guys, they know everything about you, but those guys never use what they know about you against you.
Oh no, they only for you. Only, yeah, no. If they ever lie about me, it's only to make me sound better. I promise. No, I know exactly what you mean.
Yeah.
Except for the odd time when they use it just to embarrass you.
Yeah, well, that's different.
Right.
Rory's uncle Rob likes to tell Rory the story of when we went to see Jurassic Park in grade 6 and I ran out of the theater crying. Right? Like he loves, like, he puts all these little things in my kid's head, so he comes at me with them. It's very sweet.
Yeah. So you mentioned earlier, about when you're down like that, somebody reaching out to you,
Yeah.
trying to pull you out. So is that kind of how you got back to helping people with addiction and mental illness? Is that kind of the driving force, say maybe the give back, I guess?
I think one of the things you wrestle with once you've been through the valley, right? Like once you've been through the hard place, you come back, you start to make your way out, and you realize you're really fortunate to have moved out, because while you were going through the valley, you met lots of people who have been there for a long time and who aren't making their way out. And again, like I think a lot of the reason I was able to, because I had lots of people helping me, right? And some of the privileges I've had in life that made way for that. And so as I try to rebuild, and I'm building my leadership company, 403 Leadership Collective, which we have a group of speakers and workshop leaders. As I look to do that, I want to lift up those who I met along the way, right? Like I feel like it's almost incumbent upon me to do so. If I really want to work to moving forward, is I gotta grab onto a few people who want to come with me.
Yeah. So you studied in Rome?
I did, yeah.
That's pretty interesting.
Yeah, I can tell you a little bit about that if you'd like.
I love it.
Yeah, so I was invited to take a course at the Anglican Center in Rome back in March 2013. It was booked in January, and in February, news came out of the Vatican that Pope Benedict was stepping down as Pope, which is the first time that had ever happened. A Pope had not died in office in like 700 years. So this is not a regular occurrence, and I had no anticipation of knowing that. And so somebody said to me, okay, it's like 45 days until what's going to happen next. I did the math, and I'm like, that's the day I fly to Rome to go to this course. And so I studied in Rome with the now primate of the Anglican Church of Canada, Linda Nichols. The professor was Paula Gooder from England. It was incredible going to the sites in Rome, hearing lectures on Holy Week. And the most incredible piece was, it was at the end of the day. I think it was the third ballot, and I'd been at my lecture. And so I went to St. Peter's Square. There's probably about 10,000 people in the square at the time. And I saw the smoke come up from the Sistine Chapel, and it was white. And so I was like, oh man, I'm standing in St. Peter's Square as the white smoke is going up. And within an hour, there were 750,000 people in the square. Like, and I'm not exaggerating. It was like to watch 750,000 people gather in the square. And I waited for 3 hours in the pouring rain with all these people listening to like Filipino nuns singing in different languages. It was like Pentecost, like singing in different languages. And the Pope, the new Pope Francis, steps out, and not once in those 3 hours, for any of those 3 hours, did I realize I would not be able to understand a word that he would say, because he would speak in Italian. So he addresses the crowd. And what he actually said, and I found out later, was he said Buonasera, which is the language of the people, and he invited the crowd to bless him, which is the first time a pope has ever done that. His first words to the crowd were, "You bless me before I bless you." And I thought it was very beautiful. He's the first pope I've ever seen in my lifetime, at least, that is well respected in so many different circles. Progressive to conservative to Protestant and evangelical. The Latin American roots. Being in Rome to study there while such an interesting historic figure was elected, it's one of the great moments of my life, really.
Right place, right time.
Oh, it's incredible, right? Yeah.
Wow, that must have been awesome.
It was.
I can't imagine the emotions that you would have at something like that.
Well, especially when you're so connected. You're connect. Like, it wasn't my denomination. I was an Anglican, but you're connected to the church. You're somebody who spent a lifetime, learning the stories and sharing them, and trying to live out the mission of serving the least. The head of a church of 1 billion people, the Roman Catholic Church. 2,000-year-old institution, and you're standing there in that historic moment. It was mind-boggling. I don't know if there's no real words, right? Like, yeah. It's unbelievable. So
tell us a little bit about your work with your nonprofit.
Yeah, so it's not a nonprofit. What it is. I started with, I was leaving active ministry, and I was going to do some coaching. But the coaching led to some invitations to speak, and then some invitations to do workshops. And then I started to realize a lot of the people I'd worked with in my life are really good speakers. That's just not what they do for a living. And so I started to pull them together. And so I'm doing coaching with a number of different people from an incredible Black preacher in Cambridge, Ontario, Steve Green, who, if you get a chance to look at St. Luke's Faithful News, he's a really, really interesting guy. I'm working with him. I'm developing some mental health, spirituality, and mental health workshops that are going to be offered in churches and synagogues, which is going to be pretty interesting this fall. Hopefully they'll be in person if everyone's vaccinated. Mm-hmm. And I've got a group of speakers that are going around because I started this. I get lots of requests, and I don't fit the bill for certain things, right? Like, it's, like a great example, Giselle Clark Treneman. She's a stage manager of a presentation house theater in Vancouver. Somebody asked me about a drama workshop recently, and I thought, let's put them in touch with her, and so she's one of my featured leaders on 403lc.com. So I don't know what it's going to be yet. It's kind of still evolving, but this is what life looks like for me right now.
Sounds like
basically you're collecting. So, sorry, I was going to say, so basically you're collecting leaders. So the 403, you're going to have a list of places.
Exactly. People's needs with people's gifts.
Yeah, you're a connector.
It seems so.
Hey, that's a great position to be in.
I mean, it's a very fulfilling position to be in. Because somebody said to me the other day, you've got an incredible network. And I don't know if I'd ever fully named that as a thing, right? Like, the truth is, I served 10 years in 3 significant congregations, 3 significant churches. I got to know professional athletes and judges and daycare workers and teachers and civil servants. And you realize that most people don't have circles that are quite that large. And if I can match needs with gifts, because I happen to be someone who's connected with all those different people, what an incredible thing I get to do. If that's the case.
Yeah,
it's wonderful.
Yeah, definitely. So, David, how can our listeners reach out to you?
You can check me out. My handles for Instagram and Twitter and Facebook, and that is GIF on the Way, GIFFONTHEWAY. And my website is www.403lc.com.
Okay, cool. Great.
Very interesting. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Yeah, no kidding.
It's wonderful to meet you both. And, I'm a storyteller, so I appreciate anyone who lifts up stories, right? Like, I think that storytelling is at the core of who we are as human beings. And I'm grateful for you guys for doing stuff like this.
Yeah, I mean, our philosophy is everyone, no matter who they are, has a story.
Oh, don't they? Don't they?
Yeah. So, and we've really heard some fantastic stories.
Very cool.
Yeah. All right, David. Well, thanks for being with us. We appreciate it.
Nice to meet you both.
Okay, you too.
Likewise.
Thank you for listening to this episode. Be sure to visit us at lifterstory.com.